The Minnesota Timberwolves are at some crossroads this offseason. After two successful Western Conference Finals trips with two different rosters, it's seemingly putting that the Timberwolves can dominate and can be at that next step in this Western Conference for years to come. With them being involved in the trade market surrounding one superstar and potentially looking to shake up their roster with losing guys in free agency as well, it is something to look at with this team and really trying to figure out what is the best direction for this team to kind of recoup all their assets, but also still stay in a top spot in this Western Conference. So in today's episode, we're going to be diving and exploring the Minnesota Timberwolves offseason breakdown, looking at potential trades I think they could do, potential free agents that they could potentially bring back, and also looking at some draft picks as well revolving around this Timberwolves team. If you do enjoy the content, let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you are a Timberwolves fan, if I did them justice, or if I completely destroyed their team, I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you do enjoy the content, definitely check out the other videos in the playlist, because we're almost done with this series. 3 teams left following this, so if your team has not been talked about, they will be coming up, but if you missed them, definitely check out the playlist because they've already broken them down. But without further ado, let's dive in and let's explore this Timberwolves squad. Alrighty, let's dive in. Let's explore this Minnesota Timberwolves squad. Very, very fun squad, I will say so myself. This year, obviously not the greatest in the regular season. Dealt with some injuries to some of its players and had some rough stretches here. But in the late half of the year, the Timberwolves went absolutely nuclear in the months of March and April and were able to climb up all the way to the 6th seed in the Western Conference, where many people, including myself, saw them as a first-round exit versus the Los Angeles Lakers, with them having Luka Doncic and LeBron. But I didn't take the fact that the Lakers having no center, the Timberwolves were just going to bury them down low, and that's what they did, proving everybody, or not everybody, but a majority of people wrong who doubted them in the first round, and then once again taking on a Warriors team that had just upset the Houston Rockets, with them having Jimmy Butler and Steph Curry. A lot of people doubted Anthony Edwards and Julius Randle once again, where they proved many people wrong, making it to their second Western Conference Finals trip. Now, it was a little bit short-lived once again, losing in 5 games to the Oklahoma City Thunder in a series that they were very vastly outplayed and showed their discrepancies of how they, I guess, could compete in this Western Conference. But with them having, obviously, Anthony Edwards, a very young piece and rising star in this league, could be, one of the franchise, not franchise guys, obviously, for the Timberwolves team, he's going to be, but for the league kind of being a standout is very key to keep an eye on this Timberwolves squad and what they're doing. And they're being very aggressive already, and we'll get into that just a little bit when we do talk about some of the players that they can trade. But when looking at the Timberwolves offseason roster and kind of gauging what they can do this offseason, they have a lot of options now. With this Timberwolves squad, if we want to look at their salary, they're already in the first apron, right? With 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 guys under roster. And this Timberwolves squad is going to get very, very expensive if they do try to keep all pieces intact. As you guys can see, Julius Randle, who was just traded to them last season, right before training camp for Karl Anthony Towns, had a very good postseason and is on a player option. They also have Naz Reid, who has also been one of their more impactful scoring bigs and someone that a lot of people thought that they should have locked up long term and maybe look to move off one of these guys already, but we'll get into that just in a little bit. And like I mentioned with that, they have those key guys plus Nickeil Alexander-Walker over in free agency. And for the Timberwolves, a team that is also trying to stay competitive, but maybe try to reshuffle their roster a little bit, maybe moving out some guys, shrinking down some salary, but still having the right roles and key players there. It's going to be very difficult to manage that. They do luckily have 2 draft picks, kind of uncompared to some of these other teams. The Timberwolves do strike lucky here, having the 17th overall pick in this year's NBA draft, which, in my opinion, is a very good pick for the Timberwolves to potentially even trade back to get more assets, but also to potentially even strike on a piece if they do lose a key role player this offseason that can make and implement right away into their rotation. They also have pick 31, which also could gauge some interest from other teams if a player does fall out of the first round and they do want to select him with that pick 31 pick, or if the Timberwolves do see that themselves, it gives them a little bit more ammo as well to get into that younger draft stock, to where losing some guys wouldn't be as detrimental. So let's dive in and let's explore this Minnesota Timberwolves team first. As always, we're going to dive in and explore some potential trades this team could do, looking at some contracts that could be moved. So the obvious question mark revolving around this Timberwolves team is Kevin Durant, because I do think that personally, if Durant was open to signing an extension with the Timberwolves. As we know, he is not at this moment. His preferred destinations are Miami, San Antonio, and Houston. I think that this deal would already have been done. I do think Minnesota, obviously not for just the fit of adding another great player in Durant alongside a core of Anthony Edwards, would be very key for this team in helping them take that next step and potentially getting to those NBA Finals, or even winning the NBA Finals. But with Anthony Edwards having such an infatuation with Kevin Durant, being his idol, his number one favorite player growing up, this would just be a great story to see in the NBA. Imagine a young star player growing up idolizing Kevin Durant, and then he gets to play with him and push to win a championship. And if they do get to that point, the storylines, the narratives, it would be just great. But not only just that, it would be great for Durant to once again get to that mountaintop. And I do think the Timberwolves can build that core kind of around it. Yes, it would be a little bit difficult with the pieces that are, being discussed that are going to get moved, and we'll get into that just a little bit here as well. But I do think that adding a piece like Kevin Durant would make sense for this Timberwolves team to take that next jump, right? They made the Western Conference Finals with Karl-Anthony Towns. They didn't really think they were going to be able to do so, but they did. Then they traded Karl-Anthony Towns to try to set some salary. They still did that with Julius Randle, and they could even keep Julius Randle in a move like this, or potentially look to offload him in another deal overall to get some more upgrades for this team as well. But like I said, if Durant is willing to sign that extension, I do think a deal with the Timberwolves will go down. It's reported the package that they are interested in involves Rudy Gobert, Dante DiVincenzo, and potentially even Rob Dillingham as well. Now, some other names that I potentially see being traded for this Timberwolves squad, maybe Mike Conley as an older veteran if they do believe in Dillingham, but if Dillingham is young and they do see that untapped potential and rather going for an all-win move now and still feel they can sign a backup point guard out in free agency to play a solid role at the veteran minimum, then, or even drafting one, then trading a guy like Rob Dillingham makes sense. When talking about Dante DiVincenzo, he obviously didn't really have much of a fit into this with this team. He obviously was very successful with the New York Knicks, wanted a little bit of more of a starting role once they traded for Mikal Bridges and got Mikal Bridges. He realized he wasn't going to be able to do that. Then he got traded to Minnesota and still wasn't able to really do that. Now, I do think he's a good scorer and spacer alongside Anthony Edwards and fits really well, but with his contract being one of the tradable assets that the Timberwolves do really have, it would make sense if they were to go in for Kevin Durant that he would be involved in that package. And then lastly, it's Rudy Gobert. Now, you could ask, why is Julius Randle not in there? But obviously he has a player option, and with a sign and trade, now the Suns can't do that because they're above the aprons. Same with the Timberwolves, they can't perform a sign and trade, so it makes it very, very difficult for them to do so. But not only just that, it does seem that like Julius Randle would obviously have to accept where he'd be wanting to go if he wanted to play there. Unlike Rudy Gobert, who's signed to a long-term deal, even though he is making more money, would be that defensive anchor that the Suns could be looking for. But obviously that leaves a big hole, because even if you bring back Naz Reid and even if you do keep Julius Randle, there's no center there alongside Anthony Edwards and Kevin Durant. So you'd have to figure out a way to solve that issue potentially in the draft, free agency, or using one of these other contracts, like I mentioned, maybe even using a Julius Randle contract to go and get that center. But ultimately, I don't know if the Timberwolves will fully strike on Kevin Durant at this moment. It's really up in the air. I would say they probably got a 25% chance, like every other team realistically does, that is kind of in that race with his preferred destinations. If they don't trade for Kevin Durant, I don't necessarily know what moves they make. Maybe it's a little bit different, but maybe because these guys are on the trade block in this rumor deal, apparently, maybe these guys are the ones they're looking to offload. Obviously, with Rudy making a lot of money, they could obviously bring back Naz Reid and be able to kind of fill that role a little bit offensively at the center position there. And still have to find a defensive center, maybe in the draft if they were to offload Rudy. Maybe they do look to move off a guy in DiVincenzo if they do lose a key free agent, which we'll get into in a little bit, to get another replicative piece of a defensive player. And then maybe Dillingham does move. I ultimately don't think Dillingham will move unless he's in a big deal to go out and get a star, and right now that's linked to Kevin Durant. Maybe there's other stars that the Timberwolves become interested in as well, but at this moment it does seem like it's Kevin Durant. So I don't know if Dillingham would be involved in any package outside of KD, but it's definitely something to be interested in. So regarding those trades, that's basically what I got for the Timberwolves here. Just keep an eye out for them because they seem to be aggressive, and if they don't strike in a KD move, that still leads me to believe that they're going to be doing something out there on the trade market this offseason. Alright, so with the Timberwolves next, we're going to look at the draft, and because they have some draft picks, we can actually analyze some stuff. Now, I don't have images for everybody that I am going to mention or talk about, but I would like to get into a plethora of guys that I think the Timberwolves could draft, and because They have some names like Julius Randle on the player option, Naz Reid on the player option, Rudy Gobert mentioned in some trades. I don't know really the certainty of their big man group. And like I mentioned, if they trade Kevin Durant, they still need to get that solid defender. So maybe at pick 17, there's two options that I have in mind for the Timberwolves here. First one being Thomas Sorber coming out of Georgetown. Now, obviously, Sorber not the best offensive big, only shot 16% from three-point range in college in his short time, and dealt with a foot injury that really limited him, which had him to get surgery. But his wingspan is absolutely insane. His post work is incredible. He's one of the best defenders and rebounders in this class, and I truly do believe a guy in Thomas Sorber is really going to change the game at the next level. I really do think that he would be a high-level lottery pick, if not top 10 pick. He was able to play out this season, but all due to the fact of those limitations, it really has hindered his draft stock. And for a team like the Timberwolves, once again, they're looking to trade a guy like Rudy Gobert if they need that interior defensive piece. A guy like Thomas Sorber can be that guy now. Obviously, as a rookie, 6'10", 255, he's going to be a big body out there alongside Kevin Durant, and I think he'd be a great, valuable piece for this squad here for the Timberwolves. And then another one is Danny Wolf. Wolf is obviously a playmaking big. He can shoot the ball pretty solid as well. And I truly do believe a guy in Danny Wolf could also help out this Timberwolves squad if they're looking to lose some of those bigs, right? Maybe a Naz Reid, maybe a Rudy Gobert does leave, or even a Julius Randle. A guy like Danny Wolf can plug and play. And the best part about Danny Wolf as well is over at Michigan, he played alongside another 7-footer, which just goes to show you that with the Timberwolves running to love their big man lineups, he would be a perfect shoe fit for this team to run alongside one of those guys if they do keep him, and still be a great interior defender. Once again, Danny Wolf, a little bit of question marks with his turnovers, but it's all because he was the playmaker for Michigan. I do believe that those will obviously go down with him in a limited role, and I do think his post work, obviously his shooting is pretty solid as well, and he would definitely bring a great complement to guys like Anthony Edwards and Kevin Durant. When I'm talking about some other guys as well, like I mentioned, I don't have any pictures for them, but I do want to talk about, when looking at this draft class, is some free agents that they could lose. And Nickeil Alexander-Walker is one of them. We'll get into him in just a little bit, but maybe they look at a guy like Nick Clifford, who can be that type of interior defender. Maybe they look at a guy in Drake Powell from UNC, if he does fall. And then at pick 31, there's also some guys that they could consider, right? A Maxime Reynaud if he falls, a Ryan Kalkbrenner if he falls to the next day. Those are some other big men that maybe could help out if they do go wing or potentially even guard, even with their first pick. At that second pick, that could still be valuable falling into that next day. All right, so now that we covered the draft, now that we covered some trades, we're going to go into the free agency part of things, ladies and gentlemen. Like I mentioned, we've already just talked about one of the players, so let's dive in and let's explore him again and talking about Nickeil Alexander-Walker here. Now, Alexander-Walker, fantastic defender, obviously cousins of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and he is just relentless, man. He fit so great and just is like a nonstop dog, hustling for loose balls, making the right plays, and just being that gritty, grindy defender that just everybody hates to play against. And that's what Nickeil Alexander-Walker does. He's going to go up against those guards. He's going to be your main POA guy. He's going to stick them, and he is going to cause havoc. And this is something that the Timberwolves have used graciously alongside Anthony Edwards and other players to really free up Ant to allow to be able to go into those volume scoring and really take over for this Timberwolves team on the offensive side, because a guy like Alexander-Walker, Gobert, Jaden McDaniels, and the solid defensive core around him is handling those other star players. And that's one of the key engines for how this Timberwolves team has really been able to function those last couple of seasons. Now, with Alexander-Walker, it gets a little difficult because he's really played up to his value, and with the Timberwolves being in the second apron, like I mentioned, it's going to be difficult to bring him back. There's a possibility that obviously if they shed enough salary, they're able to bring him back. But at this point, I do feel like it is very unlikely that a guy in Nickeil Alexander-Walker does return to this Minnesota Timberwolves team, which is why I prefaced earlier on that maybe they do have to prioritize one of these kind of gritty, grindy defenders to really replace a guy in Nickeil Alexander-Walker for this Timberwolves squad. And then lastly, talking about Naz Reid, he is someone else as a player option alongside Julius Randle. I mentioned Julius Randle. I expect him to be back. Even if they don't trade for Kevin Durant, I expect him to accept that player option. I don't think he's going to be leaving Minnesota. But Naz Reid's a little bit different because Naz Reid could command out there on the open market a pretty valuable contract. And there are teams that have the money that are out there, teams that are interested in a big, and one of them being the Detroit Pistons. I know he would fit in perfectly alongside Cade Cunningham. And this could be, once again, another key position that they do lose. And with having guys like Rudy Gobert and Julius Randle under contract, contract. Maybe that's why the Timberwolves are looking to get rid of those guys so they can keep a guy in Naz Reid, draft a replacement center for Rudy Gobert, and still be able to kind of stay in this young youth movement, but also still being competitive. But ultimately, I do think Naz Reid will raise a lot of questions out there on the open market. I think there's more of a likelihood of him returning than a guy in Nickeil Alexander-Walker, in my opinion, not for the fact that I do think that Naz Reid will get potentially more money, but I do think that the Timberwolves value Naz Reid more. It would rather view him more as a piece. It would rather, kind of strip down their roster so they can keep Naz Reid over Nickeil Alexander-Walker. But I also wouldn't be shocked if he is also gone as well this offseason, which would be very detrimental for this Timberwolves squad, losing two key depth pieces that have really helped them get back to the Western Conference Finals in back-to-back years. And that's basically it, ladies and gentlemen. That's diving in, exploring the Minnesota Timberwolves offseason once again for you guys. A great episode here over on Swish City. So let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section, what you guys ultimately think on my thoughts on this Minnesota Timberwolves squad. If you do enjoy the content, once again, check out the playlist, as there are a plethora of other videos diving into these teams. We're almost done with this series here, and once this series ends, we're definitely not stopping the content. There's going to be trades coming through. There's going to be draft is in less than a week. We're going to be looking at guys that I really like in the draft, guys that I don't really like in the draft, teams that did good in the draft, teams that didn't. There's going to be free agency videos, trade videos, all off the stuff coming for you guys this off season. So if you do enjoy the content, once again, I do appreciate you guys so much for tuning in. Let me know your thoughts down below, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Have a great rest of your day, and peace out, everyone.